distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies.
Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of Make It Plain. Happy to be here again. Please, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. Do all the things. It does really help. We appreciate all of the support. All right, so this week, I don't have a guest, so we're going to drop some political education. And there's a topic I've just been thinking about with everything that's been going on. Trump election, Kemi Badenoch, Chris Carver in the UK. There's a topic I want to hit and drop a little bit of political education. But before I get to that this week, there is something that everybody's been sending me around. It's a story that I've checked out, just reading it now, actually. And it's all about the three daughters of Malcolm X have accused the CIA, FBI, and the New York Police Department, as well as others, in a $100 million lawsuit for the assassination of Malcolm, right? So you know me, Malcolm X, my favorite person in history. In fact, Malcolm X's 100th birthday, we're organizing a convention for African people, Gambia, May 17th to 19th. Also now, I have a Malcolm X book coming out, Nobody Can Give You Freedom. It comes out for his birthday next May. And also, we're going to make a documentary. So, yeah, we're going to take some of the money you got from the book to make a documentary about Malcolm, Malcolm's life. What will Malcolm say if he was here with us today? In fact, I'm going to be in New York for a week we're going to be filming 18th, 19th, 19th, 20th, 21st in New York. If anybody has anybody recommends to talk to, any organizations, anything on the ground, please do get in touch. MIP@blackunity.org.uk, MIP@blackunity.org.uk, or put in the comments, YouTube, Twitter, etc., Insta, use all the comments. Do get in touch. So yeah, you know me, Malcolm X, my absolute favorite person in history. Definitely, without doubt, Malcolm was the most important intellectual on blackness in the 20th century, undoubtedly. Anyway, so Malcolm's daughters are suing the FBI. They got a very famous FBI, CIA, New York Police Department in federal court. And Ben Crump, very famous lawyer, has described the lawsuit. What did he say? We can learn all the dastardly deeds that were done by their predecessors and try to right these historic wrongs, right? So Malcolm was killed February 21st, 1965. It will be his 60th anniversary of his death next year, next February. And there is a documentary on YouTube, I think it's six-parter, Who Killed Malcolm X, that goes into it. Very, very murky. The people they arrested and went to prison for it probably didn't really do it. We know, okay, I say we know because I was writing the book and lawyers have put in the book, oh, you have to make sure you use the right terms. So we know the Nation of Islam are heavily indicated in this. It's very unlikely they weren't involved in some way. But the lawsuit is suggesting that there was corrupt, unlawful, and unconstitutional relationship between, and this is what it says in the suit, the ruthless killers that went unchecked for many years and was actively concealed, condoned, protected, and facilitated by government agents. So we've all known this for a bit. In fact, I think one of the things I said when the Who Killed Malcolm X documentary came out was the least interesting part of his life was his death, right? We know they were trying to kill him. There were apparently plots to kill Malcolm abroad. Malcolm thought the CIA were going to kill him because he thought the work he was doing, traveling around the African continent and, trying to link up the African-American struggle with the African struggle. Malcolm thought that was the work that was going to get him killed. That was the work that was really, really dangerous. So actually one of the, I'm not sure it's in the documentary, but one of the theories that in 65, just before he's killed, Malcolm is supposed to go to France. So he's in London in 65. He's supposed to fly to France. This was in February 65. He's supposed to fly to France. And he gets to France and they don't let him in. They say, you're an undesirable person. Malcolm had been in France before, so he was very surprised, very angry about it. He telephones through a speech he was supposed to do in France. That's actually why he ends up in my hometown, Birmingham, because he comes back. They deport him back to London, and the Indian Workers Association hear about this and take the opportunity to bring Malcolm up to Birmingham, visit Smethwick. There's a very famous picture in the documentary. We're going to cover this. And he thought the CIA. He thought, and actually one of the theories is that the reason that the French did not want Malcolm in France was because they got wind the CIA were going to kill him in France, and they didn't want Malcolm to die in France, which could be the case. He certainly died 9 days later. In 9 days later, February 21st. So the Shabazz family is saying, look, collusion between NYPD, FBI, CIA. Wouldn't be surprised. We know that what does the government do, the US government in particular, but UK government will also do that. If you're dangerous, they're going to kill you, right? And so it's good. It's good that the daughters and Shabazz family have put this case in. Let's see where it goes, you know, but put some pressure on, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's important to not let these things die, in a sense, like, not just forget. And there's a major anniversary, 60 years next year, as there's a major anniversary of Malcolm's assassination, and also a major anniversary of Malcolm's birth. He would have been 100 years old next year. He probably wouldn't have got there. Obviously, 100 is pretty old, but it would have been his 100th birthday. And he was cut down, assassinated, gunned down, and we know that the government was involved. I mean, come on, this is so always the most blatantly obvious when figures like Malcolm X are assassinated. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Follow up with that case. We'll definitely keep an eye on that and see where that goes. All right. Actually, related to that, the bit of political education that I wanted to drop today was something I've been thinking about for a while, and actually was going to write something down about it, but things have been very, 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 very hectic. As you know, in the UK, October was Black Employment Month, so very busy, and then you spend November just catching up from Black Employment Month. And so I'm going to talk it through, and maybe I write it down, and maybe I get around to writing it down, fleshing it out properly. But the headline of this, topic of this is, there is no such thing as a racist, right? There is no such thing as a racist. I was talking to someone yesterday about this, and I'm like, what do you mean? No such thing as a racist? You can't say there's no such thing as a racist. I'm like, no, actually there isn't. I think that one of the worst ways we think about, understand racism is that there are these individual races, right? There is this racist person who does this racist thing, and that's what racism is. I think actually any way that we wanted to fix up how we think about racism, it really, 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 really would be to basically take this idea out of mind. Take the individual racist just out of your head. Individual racists do not exist. Now, what is that? We all know there's people who say racist things. We all know there's people who hold racist ideas. We know there's people who do racist killing. Are we saying they're not racist? Right? So let's take Trump. We know Trump has racist views, says racist things. They're going to have racist policy. So is Trump not am I saying that if we say that there's no racist, we're saying that Trump is not racist? Someone that lynches a black man or a black woman, are they not a racist? So I say no. And the reason I say no is it's important distinction. And the reason we have to think about racism on the one hand and prejudice on the other. All right? Now, individual prejudice is, I don't like you because you're black, or I don't like you because you're whatever. We all have prejudices. I have prejudices. I am not going to list my prejudices right now, but I promise you we all have prejudices. And when I'm in the street and someone calls me the N-word, that's prejudice. There are prejudiced people. There are very individually prejudiced people. You can see them everywhere. They're all around, etc., etc., etc. But racism isn't individual. Racism is systemic. Racism is always systemic. Right? Racism is not that individual prejudice. So I'm out in the street and someone shouts the N-word at me. In fact, one of the things that we've done over the last 60 years really is we've outlawed racial prejudice. That's what we've done. We said, look, racial prejudice is illegal. If you get caught doing racial prejudice, you're going to you might go to prison. You might end up you might go to prison. You might lose your job. Things can happen to you. There are consequences of racial prejudice, and therefore there is no longer racial prejudice, right? I mean, there is racial prejudice, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot less, right? And because of that, there's a lot less racial prejudice because there are consequences. So people are wary of doing things that can be deemed to be racist. So it tends to go underground, undercover. People still have the views, but they don't express them. All right. So one of the things which I've been fortunate enough to experience because of that generation, my mom's generation came over to the UK, and I always stress to people that the UK, huge racial prejudice. Like, we like to think of America as being a place with racial prejudice, but actually UK is terrible. UK is awful. When my mom came over here, they were chasing it down, throwing monkey, chance at her, N-word this, N-word that. Loads and loads and loads of that's terrible. I mean, football is one of the areas where you can see this the best, actually, where one of the reasons why, and again, this is something I will probably eventually write down, one of the reasons why you'll find a lot of black people in the UK don't support their local football team is because when our parents came over here, the local football teams were the fans were so racist, saying no such thing as racist, and displayed so much racial prejudice that you couldn't even go. Like, my mum was chased down the street with me in a pushchair by, I don't know which fans it was. It was either Villa or West Brom, chanting monkey chants. Like, I'm going to go support a local team in that situation. So I supported the team who was on television. And the team who was on television when I was young was Manchester United, right? Because they were popular, they were on TV. This is a time when there were only like 4 channels when I was that young. The games, only certain games are televised. I saw United on TV, I support United. My mum is also from Manchester, which is my usual excuse. But actually, it's really just because I supported who was on TV. So what you tend to find in the UK is that you can kind of tell how old somebody is by what football team they support. So the people a bit older than me tends to be Liverpool, a bit younger than it was Arsenal and it was Chelsea, because we just don't have that connection. And that's about individual prejudice. So what has football done? Football really focused on individual prejudice. Right, football said we're going to get rid of the chants, the bans, etc., etc., etc. We're going to clean up the game. We're going to move on, etc., etc., etc. Right now, that's happened largely in England, not in Spain, not in Italy, not in the continent. Still see it, but in England, it's rare in the top leagues. You're going to find monkey chants and stuff like that. I remember there was John Barnes, who was one of Britain's first top flight black footballers. Back in the day, played for Liverpool. Again, like I said, people older than me play for Liverpool. I support Liverpool, and he got loads of abuse. Someone threw a banana at him, and he picked it up and ate it famously on the pitch. And I remember there was a poster once, and it said had a picture of a coin, had a picture of a golf ball with a nail in it, and it had a picture of a banana. And it's like, these are things you can throw on the pitch, throw at players. And it said, the banana hurts the most. I promise you, the banana did not hurt the most. Jeez, if you give me a choice of those 3 things, a coin, a golf ball with a nail put through it, or a banana, please, throw the banana. Honestly, I'd take the banana 9 times out of 10. And like I said, John Barnes picked his banana up and picked one of the bananas up and ate it. Right? But that was the kind of paint by numbers racism, right? Let's stop doing this. Throw golf balls with nails in them at football players rather than bananas. And look, racism disappeared. I mean, it's nonsense, right? So that's what we've done. And because of that, because there's been so much focus on outlawing racial prejudice, it means that people that I don't really experience racial prejudice too much. It's rare. Like, it's very, if I was to count the amount of times I've experienced overt racial prejudice, it's very, very few, particularly living in cities. So I live in Birmingham. Birmingham is majority minority now, second largest city in Britain, massive black population. Like, it's rare. Like, it can happen. Don't get me wrong. If you go to the wrong parts of Brom, you get it. There's parts of Birmingham, because of racial segregation, I could probably find lots and lots of overt racial prejudice. In fact, after I was on Good Morning Britain, I think I said that in the Second World War, the RAF was guilty of war crimes in Germany when it carpet bombed German cities and killed hundreds of thousands of German civilians. People didn't like that stuff. So one of my white colleagues in a pub in Northfield, I think Northfield's like a very white neighborhood, which, again, I just stayed to my end and it's all right. And overheard people talking about wanting to lynch me. So believe me, racial prejudice is there. I'm just saying, it's rare to get it. Rare. I can count the amount of times I've been called a nigger by a white person twice to my face, twice. In my school, right next to an estate with lots of racists, right? People with racial prejudice, and occasionally the skinheads, they would come up when we were in playground, because we had these big fields and we on the fields and we playing, and they'd come up with big bats swinging at us going, nigger, nigger, and you have to run through it. Yeah, that was one time. I don't think they ever actually got any effect. I don't remember anybody ever being caught by them, but one time one of them came up by himself and he got beaten so badly by the other black boys that they never came back, right? But that's what happens in Birmingham. That's the kind of thing that happens. You'll get people who come in and then they'll get run out and they won't come back again, right? Because, again, lots of us here. And so that's one time. Second time, I was walking back from school through this neighborhood and some little white kid came and said, look at you, nigga. I laughed at him. I was like, what's wrong with you? And walked off. Like, that's racial prejudice. right? There is not to be supported, but etc. etc. It's prejudice. And by itself, like this white kid laughing at me and me laughing at him off and walking off, didn't bother my day. It's no meaning to it, right? What makes that racism? What is that there is a system that supports it? And this is really important. It's a system that supports it, not the act itself. Does that make sense? So this is important. This is when we say, so when we think about, I said I did a whole talk. The last time I did political education, it was about the racial relations legislation being used against us, right? To police us. So the idea that we say racially prejudiced things, and that's treated the same way as white people saying racially prejudiced things, and we end up more charged under the Racial Relations Act than white people, right? Actually more likely to be charged. Like most police things are more likely to be charged. And so that's because it's a misunderstanding, right? Because there's nothing to support, to back up, to link, to connect our racial prejudice, right? When it's not racism. We can't, when we're prejudiced in those ways, it's simply not racist in the same way because there's nothing to support it, right? Racism is the system that supports it. So let's take Donald Trump is the perfect example of this. Donald Trump is someone who clearly has racial prejudice, very, 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 very clearly has racial prejudice, tries to hide it often, and the black people, etc., all that nonsense. But what makes him exceptional, what makes his his prejudice legitimate, is the fact he's the president. Been the president, going to be the president again, and then can enact racist policy. Right? That's the racism. It's a structure that supports that allows that. Flip it around. Imagine if Barack Obama came out like 1963 Malcolm X saying, these white devils. Imagine. What are you going to say one time white devils and things man done? Can't even, not possible. Because those prejudices, those are not supported. You see what I'm saying? So that's the thing that you can have. They hate these hunkies. Any black person says that, you ain't getting nowhere. You're going to get fired from your job. You're going to be off. You're going to be done. You're not going to be. That's going to be disqualification of president. So anybody can have individual prejudice. The problem is the system is racist, and what the system does is the system supports, promotes, reproduces racist prejudice against black and brown people. Right? That's the problem. That's the point. So even if you go back to lynchings, when you were being lynched, the problem, I mean, obviously, there is a problem that people have prejudice so badly against you that they want to kill you. That's a problem, don't get me wrong. But the racism, that's prejudice. That you have prejudice, people coming to kill you, that's terrible. What makes it racist is the fact that it was allowed to happen. There were no protections. You weren't getting, the police were there lynching you too. Then it made it industrial level. Then that supports more lynching, right? So it's the racism of the society and the state and the system, etc., that takes that prejudice and elevates it to things. So looking at the lynchers as individually racist is pointless. It doesn't get us anywhere, right? Because, and why that doesn't get us anywhere is because then the solution to that is if we think that's individual racist, if we think the problem is the racists, then all that we do is try to stop the racists. So let's stop lynching. Let's stop the lynching. Right? Well, you stop lynching. People don't get lynched as much anymore. Lynching is obviously not a feature of American society as it was. But is American society any less racist? No. I'm not getting chased down the streets by the National Front, the skinheads anymore. Like I said, very rarely even get called a nigger. My mom was called a nigger constantly. Very rarely. That happens. Very unlikely. Does that mean British society is any less racist? No, because what we've done is we've misdiagnosed the problem. We said that, look, here the problem is the racists, and how do we stop the racists, and how do we train out the racists? Missing the point that there's no such thing as a racist. I don't care if you're like this is kind of like Malcolm, to go back to Malcolm again, the fox and the wolf, right? The fox is that's the person the wolf, sorry, that's the person we'd call the racist. The wolf, there's their teeth in a snarl. They're the one who's coming after you. They're the ones calling you N-word. They're the ones beating you. They're the ones. That's the problem. We focus so much on them. The Trumps. And so that's what we see Trump, we're like, oh, he's a racist. Oh, we don't want racists. Oh, it's terrible, right? But the fox bears their teeth in a smile, still going to eat you. You still end up in the doghouse, right? But you still end up in the doghouse. Still the same thing happens. It's not any better. They're just not the racists, right? So we missed the point, right? Fox and the wolf just as bad. It doesn't matter if you want to be eaten and they're coming from the front or eating, they're coming from the behind. Either way, you're getting eaten. Right? So when we talk about individual racists, we miss the point. The problem is the system itself, right? So And this is the reason why so many people misdiagnose what happened in the election with Trump, right? Because people thought, well, look, he's clearly a racist, like clearly a racist, right? Like January, if you weren't sure before, January 6th really pointed it out, right? White supremacy, all this, supported it. The way he was in Black Lives Matter protests, the way he's been about the diversity and inclusion, the attack on the curriculum, attack on Black thought, like he's very clearly a racist, very clearly. Even think about immigration reform, right? He wants to deport 10 million people, racist. And too many people thought that white America, and I'll say white America, but I'm going to come to something else afterwards. I can say white America. Too many people thought that meant that people wouldn't vote for him because he's a racist. People don't like racists. We're not going to vote for a racist. Nonsense. Sorry, that's the stupidest thing ever, right? Because it's not about the racist, it's about the system. And white supremacy is a system, right? So if you're thinking as individually racist voters who are supporting Trump and that's the problem, then you've missed the point, right? I remember watching the coverage. I was watching it early on and they had somebody who voted for Obama and then was now voting for Trump. And you had a lot of those Obama-Trump voters. If you hold the fact that people are voting for Trump because they're racist, they are racists, right? Well, why would they vote for Obama? Doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense because racists wouldn't vote for a black man. But you can be, but you can 100% hold these two things. I vote for I can vote for Obama, I can vote for Trump, and I can have deeply racist ideas in my mind, right? Because guess what? There's no such thing as a racist. It's far more complicated. People are voting for lots of reasons, economic reasons, right? But there aren't these individual. No, don't get me wrong. There are racially prejudiced individuals. We can see them. We know them. Those people probably aren't voting for Obama. Or probably were never going to vote for Obama, right? But the bigger problem is there are people who don't think themselves to be racist, right? You vote for Obama, you don't think yourself to be a racist. Because, oh, I'm not racist. I didn't vote. I'm not racist. I didn't vote. I voted for Obama. Guess what that actually allows you to do? That actually allows you to vote for Trump because you're not a racist. Right? The whole rhetoric is, look, I voted for Obama. I'm not racist. The man came out and said it in the thing. He's like, oh, yeah, I'm not a racist. I voted for Trump. What do you think about Trump? I think they asked him about Trump's racist statement. He said, well, I voted for Obama. I'm not a racist. See what it does? It actually allows you the space to do the racist thing, which is structurally racist thing, to vote for the racist president, the racism, white supremacy, etc., etc., etc. Right? The whole framework idea of there are racist people is a problem because there are racist systems. And yes, there are people who have individual prejudice. Yes, they get that prejudice from the system. So you could say in something that they're parroting racist ideas, but actually that is not what racism is. Racism is not in the individual. Racism is in always in the system, systemic. And unfortunately, all that we do, football's the best example of it, certainly. And we saw that with, we saw that with a couple of years ago in England. There was this big thing where 3 of the black players missed penalties and everybody started, all the racial prejudice came out again. Like we forgot it wasn't there, right? But this is making us misunderstand the political moment because we're not understanding that people can vote for white supremacy, people can support white supremacy, people will back white supremacy without actually being racist, right? Because you don't need to be racist to do those things. The problem is the system. And that's how Trump gets elected, right? Trump gets elected by Trump needed lots of non-racist people to vote for him, right? And they could do that because they didn't think themselves to be racist. It's the worst part, honestly, thinking about what happened in the 60s, when we had this idea about institutional racism, we had this idea about, structural is about structure, etc. It's really just devolved into this discussion of, are you racist, are you not? And so much of the literature is about this. There's a book called How to Argue with a Racist, right? How do you argue with a racist? Kehinde has a book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, because that's the other flip side of this. And this is the flip side of the I am not a racist, is I am an anti-racist. So that's a badge of something, right? If you're anti-racist, it's okay, right? Because you're against racism, so you're a good guy. This whole allyship parade, this whole allyship fawning around, right? Because of this idea that you have racists, you have anti-racists. And if you're an anti-racist, you're on the right side. Guess what? so many anti-racists have been such a bane to our existence, my existence, because it's not really the question. The same way you can't be, I mean, you can be, and don't get me wrong, you can be anti-racist. Like, there are anti-racist ways to be, but you cannot be an anti-racist. What is an anti-racist? What does that even mean? It's a meaningless proposition, right? What does it mean? I'm an anti-racist. Individually, I'm anti-racism. But what does it mean to be an anti-racist? Does it mean to be an anti-racist? And it is this idea that because, you know, if we can educate ourselves out, if we can move away from everybody just anti-racist, and the system will stop being racist. That's the biggest myth, the biggest lie you're ever going to be told. This thing, and this is the problem with the conceptualization that there is a racist, therefore there is an anti-racist, this thing cannot be educated out. Racism is far too complex, far too devious, far too in depth, far too words you can think about. Racism is all of those things, right? It goes beyond these narrow classifications. So what we basically try to do when we set up then we set up the problem of racist. There are two ways to do it. One is just, you know, stop, control the racists, keep the racists out of power. The other thing is to educate, train the racism out of the racists, become an anti-racist, right? Critical pedagogy, teach it. As I've said a million times, we've been on the right side of the argument for 500 years. It doesn't get us anywhere, right? Because we've got the formulation wrong. Trying to get people to be anti-racist, trying to put anti-racists in power, that is not a solution. That is not the solution. All right? To be fair to Ibram X. Kendi, he actually does try to say, actually, no, it's not about me individually, but it is about anti-racist policy, anti-racist reform, anti-racist policy, right? Which I get, but the question is the whole formulation of anti-racism, in that sense, in that narrow sense, really is that, you know, how do you get those reforms? How do you get those policies? You get them by people who are anti-racist, who are anti-racist. And I say anti-racist, not anti-racist. Obviously, there are anti-racist ideas. But the idea that to be an anti-racist is some kind of badge of honor is something we need to leave in the dustbin of history. I work in universities. Universities are some of the most progressive, so-called progressive places. You won't find much overt racism. You will find some, believe me, I've had it, heard it, seen it. It is not totally erased or gone by any means. I would never, ever say that. But you won't find it the same way, right? So there's lots of anti-racist people, anti-racist people who say they're anti-racist. But they still make decisions which are racist, right? Because it's the system itself. It isn't the individual, right? You can't, the idea that you can somehow be individually redeemed in a collective system is nonsensical. So the problem we have here is that it's racism is actually worse than there being individual racists who are doing bad things and these anti-racists fighting the individual race. This war between racists and anti-racists is not the case. Far worse. There is a system of white supremacy which has existed, which is implemented 400 years ago. The actual antecedents of that go far beyond. That's whole other political education discussion. Go far, far, far beyond. But the premise, it's a systemic thing, right? It was about the ideas, about the institutions, about the way things work, about the where people live, where people grow up. The whole society that has Africa as the poorest part of the world, the West is the wealthiest. That sets up migration flows, all the collective ideas, etc., etc. That's racism. It doesn't need individual racists. You can have not a single racist person in the whole world, and the system would still perpetuate racism at its core. Because it's not about individuals, it's about systems and it's about structures, right? So we just need to abandon this quest. Like, drop it, leave it, done with it. All right? And now, we're good examples. I don't want to talk about Chris Carver. Chris Carver was killed by the police. And the police officer got off, right? And again, I spoke about this before. There's a perfect example of this, right? Was the individual officer individually racist? It doesn't actually matter in this case, right? Because the problem is, he got away with it because the whole society, the police force, the way that it works, who it polices, what kind of force can be used, then you get a jury trial. What does that jury trial do? That jury trial acquits the police officer. The whole framework, edifice of it supports that, and then will mean that is reproduce. Same way in America. Was Derek Chauvin the problem? Was Derek Chauvin a racist? It's irrelevant. The problem is this: you could have an individually racially prejudiced act that happened, and if the police dealt with it fairly, if society dealt with it fairly, that would not be racist, right? That's a problem. It's not racist. But they don't do it. They can't do it because the society itself is racist. So it's always going to reproduce it, and then it produces more racial inequality, more racial prejudice, etc., etc., etc. So whether or not individual racism is just not the way. We should have moved on a long, long time ago. Like there was this whole, I mentioned this in the previous one, there was the whole thing about the rotten apple. It's just a few rotten apples. It's the barrel. It's worse than the barrel. It's the whole bloody thing. It's the whole species, the whole tree, the whole thing. It's rooted, infected, rooted, structurally reproduces racism. That's what we mean by the critical race theory, say the permanence of racism, or Malcolm says a chicken can never lay a duck egg in the same way that the system can never provide freedom, justice, and equality for black people. That's where we need to understand. And we just spent far too much time trying to control the racists on the one hand, limit the racists on the one hand, keep the racists out of power, people like Trump, etc. And then on the other side, we've tried to educate people, right? Tried to change the ideas. I'm tired, man. I'm tired. After having just done a whole round of black employment month, I can tell you I'm tired with that. That's a hustle. I don't know if it's a hustle. It's definitely not a revolutionary one. I promise you that. But it can't be done because it's systemic. It's not individual. The other thing, which ties into some of the other news we talked about before, Kemi Badenoch, right-wing black people. I was teaching a class, Black Studies class, and this came up where they were like, Kemi Badenoch, she's Nigerian, surely she must know. What is it? Is it a what's wrong with it? Is she just doing it for show? Is it what is it? And I'll be honest, what has surprised me is that when you have black and brown people that hold these views, which are clearly racially prejudiced views, that the views of black people are probably have taken in all of the racist ideas, believe all the myths that we don't work hard, we're stupid, we're lazy, we're prone to crime, we're blah 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 blah. That when you and then they'll go on TV and they'll coon it up and they'll sell these ideas, right? I had previously believed this was a con, this was people just doing this, like my students, you must be just, it's got to be a con, right? It's just not real, it's fake. Having spent the time, if you haven't seen the show, I do recommend watching it. We Are Black and British, which I think is on Netflix now. It was a BBC Two show where me and 5 other people, I think there's 5 of us, went into a house down in the Cotswolds in the country. And we were sharing discussions, political views, etc., etc., etc. And there were some deeply problematic ideas on people in there. Oh my day. Dominic Samuels, who's now come to Jesus apparently. Lynn May, you'll see on social media. Calvin Robinson, House New York Calvin Robinson was supposed to be in the show, but let's just say he came in for a day and he wasn't that comfortable. Not surprised. Anyway, but he was meant to be there. And I remember going in thinking, look, this is a hustle. This is a con. They can't believe this stuff. They can't believe racism doesn't exist. They can't believe this. I went in. But genuinely, I was shocked. People genuinely believe it, really deep held in their gut. Say it with your chest. These are not pretense. They really, really, really believe it. All right? And this is because they've taken in these racist ideas and buying them, right? I said psychosis of whiteness is not just for white people. So I'm actually perfectly sure that Kemi Badenoch believes all the nonsense. And this is, again, why one of the criticisms when you criticize black people for saying stupid things is they'll say, well, why can't they think for themselves? Haven't they got their own mind? Oh, I believe she has her own mind. It's just whitewashed. So, most of your minds are whitewashed. She can think for herself. I believe that her ideas are just stupid ideas. And I'll call them out stupid, racist as much as until the end of time. Right? It's not the question of whether she has the right to do it. Who has the right to believe stupidness? We all do. But it don't make it not stupid. And it don't make it right. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't call it out either. But this is the problem with the representation now, because one of the other things we do with representation, we say, well, look, because there are individual races, if we can remove the races, get some representation of us, because we're obviously not racist, because we're black, so we can't be racist. So let's put some black people in those positions. That's the other solution. That's the third point. Right? That's the third way you address the races. Police the racists, try and stop the racists, educate people, try and build up allyship, etc., etc. Third, you get black people and put them in place. Right? That's the response to, if racism is individual, that's the response. Obviously, we must know better. Right? Guess what? All 3 don't work. Guess what? All 3 don't work. None of those 3 things work. And actually, all 3 of them are actually make it worse. And this is the other thing, it's not that it just doesn't work. It's not as bad as it's saying, look, this is why I'm saying let's just stop calling people racist. Let's just drop the whole framework of it because it takes us down the wrong way. It's not just that it's a bad way to understand things. It actually prevents us from doing the things we need to do, right? The focus on individual races, prejudice, try to lock them up, keep them, that ends up with a legal framework which ends up with more of us going into prison, more of us being attacked. This equates us being anti-white with them being anti-black. And so that's what that leads to, right? That leads to banal nonsense, kick racism out of football, where you're suggesting that somebody should throw a golf ball with a nail at me rather than a banana. That's obviously nonsensical, right? Talk about psychosis, right? At least it is this paint by numbers legislation that doesn't protect any others, that just makes the prejudice go inside. So, for example, it is illegal to discriminate for housing on the basis of race. It's illegal to discriminate jobs on the basis of race. And what do we know? Both still happens. People get discriminated in housing and people get discriminated in employment on the basis of race. It doesn't even work. It doesn't even because it doesn't work. It's nonsense. Can't work, right? So it actually just leads us to do a lot of things which don't help, right? It leads us to confuse us that somehow this is a way forward, and then leads to into a framework which actually makes it worse for us, right? It's actually now in fact, I would rather you discriminate against me openly than covertly. If you tell me, you didn't get this job because you're black, I have some recourse. I can do something about that, right? If you just say, you didn't get a job because you weren't qualified, but really it's because I'm black, I actually can't do anything about it, right? So we now have a framework. You got racism still there. You can't do nothing about it. I had this exact experience at work where something clearly racist, it was so obviously racist, happened. And I went and said, well, this is racist. But because the N-word weren't used, because it wasn't like, I just rather the person had just called me a nigger. Like, it would have just been way easier. But actually, I ended up getting disciplined because they didn't call me a nigger. You know what I'm trying to say? It's not bad. It's not just that it's bad, it's that it's worse, right? Same way we're trying to educate people out, right? Try and teach out. We spend so much time trying to teach racism out, and it just comes back again and again and again to bite us. Whole thing of DEI, this whole thing, and maybe that, look, I said, Black Employment Month, I'm happy to come, happy to take the money. Maybe you never know, it does something for a few people that are there. I know it benefits a few people when you go in and do that. But generally speaking, it doesn't work, right? But we spend so much money, so much investment on it, so much time on it, and we just get kicked in the teeth again and again and again. So again, not just bad, but actually, and then leads to what? Backlash. That's what you see with Trump, DEI initiatives, backlash against EDI, backlash against us, backlash against black stuff in the curriculum, right? We try and teach, and we just get backlash. So it actually ends up, again, coming back to us worse in a particularly perverse form, as Derek Bell would say. All right? And then the third one, black representation. Oh my gosh, but that's the worst. The worst. There's no doubt about it. Undoubtedly, the worst byproduct of their individual races is representation. Because you now have a whole swathe of people. Right winger picked up on this. We're putting these people in places who believe it. You know what I'm saying? Call them puppet. I ain't even calling you a puppet. I think you believe it. Kenny Bagnall's not a puppet. She believes it. She's doing what she thinks is right. But has been elevated into that position. Can lead a coalition between reform, the actual fascists, and the Tories, because she's black. Imagine if I'm right. Imagine if I'm right and we actually end up in 4 years' time, the UK has a government that has Nigel Farage in it because they have a black woman as president, as prime minister, as leader. Imagine that. And then if it happens in 4 years, and I tell you that, let's keep this on tape, right? We already had it with Obama in America, right? Black president and the war in Libya. Black president drone striking people all over the world. Black president, every indicator for black African Americans goes down under his watch, right? The black face of white supremacy. The black face of white supremacy. It's a thing. The black face of white supremacy has now become a real thing. Before it was. Again, I always say let's not be anti-historical now. This has always been the case. Let's not pretend this is a particularly new feature of the thing. It's not really a new feature. It just was. It's just a particularly perverse form, right? As I always say, particularly perverse form. And so this is the danger of this, right? This is what I'm saying. Like when I say there's no such thing as a racist, your first reaction is going to be, oh, you can't say that. No. We need that language. I heard it. I've tested this out a few times. But this is the point of political education. Undo it. Take it to its roots. See where you go. Where does that lead you? Where does the belief in individual races get us? It don't get us nowhere. Right? It don't get us nowhere. It gets us to a point where we just get stuck. And not just stuck, but it actually makes it worse because we're misdiagnosing the problem. If we say racism is systemic, racism is systemic. And even if you want to keep their individual races, right? We want to call those people racist, whatever. The problem isn't that they're individually racist. The problem is a system that allows them to be individually racist and supports them, promotes them, and creates more individual races. Right? So even if you want to keep the language, I wouldn't personally, I'll move on from it and say racism is systemic and let's call this something else. If you want to keep that language, the misunderstanding, actually the problem, the cause of that is systemic, not individual. So if the cause of that is a system, the solution to that can't be the individual. It can't be getting more individuals in this place. It can't be training more individuals. It can't be getting non-white black individuals. That can't be the solution, right? Because the solution has to be a systemic solution. And this is where we need to think. This is why I'm saying this is why I just say let's abandon it, let's get rid of it, let's move on from it. Because we just tend not to see that, tend not to do that, tend not to be able to make that link and those connections, right? Because it's difficult. Once you have this language, oh, racist is racist, that, this is what racist is. And this is the problem. So this is what I'm saying. Please, let's abandon the idea. I would say there's racially prejudiced people, yeah? But we need to focus much more on the systemic issues. So we're having a conversation about racism. It should be about, actually, no, let's look at the fact that around the world, the poorest parts by income per capita is the so-called sub-Saharan Africa. It's a massive cluster of people there, and the richest parts and the white parts in general. All right, there's a hierarchy in between. Let's look at life expectancy. Let's look at poverty rates. Right. So, I mean, I'm not going to go into this in big depth, but Ta-Nehisi Coates just had a book come out called The Message in Heaven. Another book a few years ago, about Obama. You know, we were 8 years in power with Obama. Absolute nonsense. Black people were not in power with Obama. That's the title of the book. It's nonsensical, right? And you feeling let down by Obama is a problem, right? This is it. We misidentified the Obama phenomenon completely, right? Because, yeah, you can't be let down by somebody who's not for you. Shouldn't be the case. Shouldn't be let down by somebody who's not for you. So if we're having a conversation about racism under Obama, it's not about the fact that you had a black president. That's meaningless. You have to look at the indicators. I said they all went worse. Poverty rate went worse. Everything went worse. Everything went down. You had Black Lives Matter came up under the black president. So that's how we discuss racism, right? If we have Birmingham State University has a black studies degree, has a black professor, that's not how you look at racism. Look at the awarding gap. She hasn't got any better, right? Black students still do significantly worse than white students. That's how you look at racism. Those are the indicators, right? More generally, American higher education, lots and lots of black representation. Well, still underrepresented, but definitely better than it was. But the majority of black students don't finish their degrees. That's what we should be discussing and focusing, right? That's the conversation about racism that we have to have. And we talk about racism, we should talk about these structural dimensions of racism and not the individual. Right? And this will allow us to deal with the problems way, 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 way better than we are currently dealing with the issues and the problems around racism. We're just not having the right conversation. And so much of that, because it's stuck in the individual realm, right? It's stuck in the individual races. And so this even happened with like Kamala Harris, right? Why didn't people vote for Kamala Harris? They don't like black women. Not that simple. Like it's not about people vote for a black woman, vote for a black person. It's broader than that, right? It's not that individual prejudice against the person. It's the much broader endowment with connection to white supremacy, right? Not about individual. It's about the collective, right? Understanding. Again, even understanding. I haven't got time to go into this in a great detail on this particular episode, but thinking about Latinos. Why did so many Latinos vote for Kamala? Not vote for Kamala, vote for Trump. Why did so many Latinos vote for Trump? Right? Parties, we like to conflate Latinos together, Latinx together as all the same, not all the same. Need to be much more nuanced with it, much wider with it. It's like, why did they vote for the racist who wants to deport Latino? It's not that simple. There's bigger things happening, right? There's bigger ideas which are circulating. It's about incorporation into society, whiteness, white supremacy. Why would, this is a very simple idea here, why would a significant portion of the Latinx population in America want to support a president who promotes white supremacy? This is obvious if you understand the history of America, which is about white migrants, we now call white migrants, European descended migrants, coming in to America and becoming white, right? Large swathes of the Latinx population are the European descended. They're white, and they want to prove they're white, so they vote white, right? It's not really that complicated. There's none of these things are that complicated when you understand, put it into a much broader connection. It's not, oh, why would they vote for the racist? It's just looking at the system of it, looking at why these systemic things happen and why these systemic things are going to be reproduced again and again and again and again and again. That's what we need to be doing. That's the challenge for us. And it's a challenge that we basically fail all the time. Right? It's a challenge we basically fail all the time. And so the collective thing is about, and then also that leads us to collective. What do we do about this? We have to think about Bun trying to stop the racists, Bun trying to educate the white people, Bun trying to get representation. We have to understand that the collective is the solution too. Just as the analysis is the solution, collective is the analysis, is the analysis structurally, it is the collective that is the solution to our problem. That we have to organize, come together, be together. That is the solution, has always been the solution to the things that face us, the challenges that face us, right? And that's where we need to focus our attention, our goals, our ideas, our work on. It is in the coming together. It is in the being and trying to, and how is the only way to fight the structure? There's two ways to fight a structure. One is to try and change that structure. And I promise you that is a pointless exercise, because what mechanism do you have to change the structure of white supremacy? You don't have one. And that individual, they're a bad race. No. The barrel, the apples are not rotten. The barrel is rotten. The barrel isn't even rotten. The barrel is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's just it's a racist barrel. So you can't fix it. Right? You can have the nicest apples you like in there. The barrel is the problem. So what is actually the solution? We need to create something else. And this is the biggest racist lie you've been told. The biggest racist lie that you've been told is that we can't create something different. That there is no alternative. That this is all there is and there's nothing that we can do about it. So we just better try and stop those individual races. Pardon that. No, the solution has always been the same. Organize, come together, see and understand our collective power. That is a solution to our problem. That has always been the solution to our problem. And that will be the solution to our problem till the end of time. But this idea, this focus on the individual racists, the Trumps, the bad guys, the bad police officers, and the idea that we can just get some good representation in it. No, done, throw it away. Forget about the individual racists. There's no such thing as a racist. There is racism. A structure that is oppressing us and it is killing us and it will continue to do that until we organize something different. This is what the work of HARAMBEE Organization of Black Unity is about. This is why we're trying to organize a convention of African people in Gambia. This is why we're trying to bring people together. Why we're trying to push different ideas. blackunity.org.uk. Make that plain.org.uk. Come together. Bring together. The solution is us organizing, building something different. This is the focus. This should be our only focus. How do we come together, build, organize collectively? Because that's the only way to deal with the system of white supremacy. The only way to deal with the system of white supremacy. All right, remember that. All right, so, and next week we have a more traditional pod. Hopefully that has been helpful. Remember, there's no such thing as a racist. Good night.